Going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company. Another tying video. I've got a swim bait today, so I didn't want to waste your time. I put a little rattle on the back of this just because I have so much room. This hook is so long and I'm not going to need all this space, so I thought I would put a little rattle on the back, and then I let the glue dry. I can't remember what brand this swim bait is, swim jig. I'll put the description below, but it's it's got a white bottom and like a dark, it's kind of light green on the sides, and it might look black in the camera, but this is like a dark green with like maybe a little gold sparkle or something like that. I really like this jig, and it's got a nice sturdy hook too. So what I'm going to do, pretty similar to what I did last video, it's going to be a lot of deer hair, a little goat, and some synthetics for the tail with some flash. I haven't tied this pattern before. I kind of just looked at the jig head and I thought that looks like a bass, so that's what I'm going with. So before I do anything, I need to get these out of the way, and one way that I like to do it is I'll take a little, you got these little hair clips. I don't have much hair, so I don't use them on my head, and I'm just gonna put it kind of like that, and it might slip eventually and I can just put it back on. But what I want to make sure is that I can tie right up to the head without getting without hitting any of the guards or this clip. They can be kind of frustrating, but this is the best way that I've kind of found to get them out of the way for the time being. I'm going to lay down some synthetic, and in the last video, or whatever, 2 videos ago, I can't remember, I talked about Nightmare Musky flies flash and fiber, and I just wanted to show you. So this hank, it actually doesn't come zip tied. I zip tie it when I open the bag just because it kind of keeps things together a little bit better. You can see how thick this synthetic hank is. And this is $6 from Nightmare Musky Flies. So it is one of the best deals I've been able to find, and it's great stuff too. This pattern is, I think, Psycho Bluegill, and I'm going to put down just a little bit. I've tapered this out, and again, like the last few videos, this bait's going to be about 6 inches, maybe a little bit longer just because this hook is so much bigger. But I don't want to go too far past that. So I'm going to put this synthetic down and leave just enough room for I'm actually going to do an Arctic goat tail. And what I'm going to do, this swim bait had a ton of, it actually had like 4 at least, of those little spikes that come in the mold. It's just lead. To keep your plastic keeper or whatever. And so I've got just an old file, literally just a file. Some guys will keep these in their boat to sharpen hooks. And I filed all that down, but these can be a little tricky to tie on because I've got a bunch of bumps. So I've got my hook here, and then I've got a bump right there, and then a little indent, and then another bump, and then just the lead. So I'm going to tie my synthetic and goat on this one. I'm going to do 1 deer hair stack here, and then I'm going to try and fit 2. I think I'll pretty easily be able to. I'm going to put 2 deer hairs here just because you don't want to tie on these bumps right here because they're going to slip. And so when you're filing these down, you can try and file it perfectly, but it's never going to be, because you're going to have to file all this lead off. You don't really want to do that. So again, swim jigs can be kind of tricky to tie on, but it is worth it when you get to do whatever pattern you want. So forgive me for in this video if I'm fumbling around with stuff because they can just be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to put this pretty long. I'm going to tie it down. I'm going to try and just do 2 stacks of this, and I want to be careful with this rattle. It's not really going to add too much bulk to that tail. I don't foresee it being a problem. So, but sometimes it can add a little bump, or it might show a little bit, and that's just the way it goes. So I've got one there, and then I'm going to try and just do my second. Got some tinsel right there. I'm just going to kind of comb this out, get them separated, and then I'm going to separate them on my hook on either side. Again, this is going to be in the way the entire time, so I try to do a lot with my left hand. Get that down, little wrap, and then I can feed it on both sides. Then I can kind of push my way around. And this is going to be kind of high and tight, just like with that last video. So, but I'm going to put this on 360. I'm not going to pinch and pull down like I'm going to with my deer hair, just because it really won't do a whole lot there. And with a hank like this, it's so cheap. I mean, I've got just this little fuzz stuff left. I could save it for like a dubbing loop or a head or something like that. But this stuff is so cheap that I'm really not worried about it. So I'm going to get that down nice and tight. And then before I go up, I'm going to put my goat down. So I want this to be a bass pattern. So I've got my deer hair I've got 3 different colored deer hairs, and I know the name of 2 of them. I have to look up this one. But I've got, I think this is called pistachio. This is from, I think all 3 of these are from Musky Fool. One might be Midwest Bucktail, I can't remember. But these are such nice tails. These are just, I think they might just be single A, so they're not crazy long, but these things are thick. So this is pistachio, and then I've got a bunch of olive ones. This is just a standard olive, and I've blended these 2 together, and it's going to be the top of my bait. And then I've got a really light green. Again, I'll have to go to the website and see if I can see what color this is. This is just like a really light green, almost like a light, super light tan too. I don't know. But this is going to be the bottom of my bait, just because most fish have that white belly. So this is going to be the bottom. I've got black and green Arctic goat for the tail, and then I'm going to try, before I put my last stack down, I've got 2 strips of black Arctic goat that I'm going to try and run along the cross of the sides for like a lateral line. And I have a ton of material sitting in front of me, and so I think this bait's going to end up coming out really thick. But this is a 3/8 ounce jig head, and so I'm not worried about a ton of materials, because this thing's still going to sink really well. And it's not a chatterbait or anything like that. If you put too many materials on a chatterbait, it doesn't run well. It might lift or something like that, but I'm not worried about this because this is just a jig. So I'm going to go just a little bit past, and I'm actually going to take off just some of these last super long fibers, just because I don't want that tail to be too thin. And I'm going to trim this off. I'm not going to fold it back or anything. I'm going to cord up my thread, and I'll get that down. Again, this is a lot of material. So I'll comb this out, get them separated. And I don't know if you're going to be able to tell what colors are in this, but it's just black and olive. Get that spun around. And I have to also use a ton of these materials because, especially up here, it's really thick. It's not just a hook. It's a bunch of lead too. And so I want to make sure that I have enough materials to spin it all the way around without having some patches of nothing. Just kind of want to be careful of that. Just want to get that all wrapped around. And it might not be perfect, but... And I'm not going to put my flash down quite yet. So I built up this big bump, and I'm not worried about it because I have to go up above that lead bump that was there anyway. Just going to trim that off so it's clean. There goes my bodkin. So I'll get some good wraps before I come over. Maybe I'll put some flash down. So I've got some olive holographic Flashaboo. Just standard, nothing special about it. I don't want to use too much. So maybe I'll split this in half. I want to go pretty far down, and then I'll put some super glue to hold this stuff down. I was thinking about using black too, but maybe I'll put some black. Later on. I might do 2 layers of flash on this one. Get that right on there. Single wrap might be good. Push that right on top. I'm trying to avoid hitting too much. I just don't want that clip to fall out every 3 seconds. So I just try to avoid it. Then I can just tie this stuff down. And if you want, you could just fold this stuff down if you want tons of flash, but I don't. So what I'm going to do, I've got this light green and then the blended olive and pistachio. I've got them separated. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and get this down. This is going to be the bottom of my bait. So I'm going to try and get this down with like a single wrap or 2. And then I'm going to flip it and I'm going to put the green on top. And then together I'm going to try and kind of configure them around, and then that's when I'm going to ream down. That's the plan, but we'll see if it works. So the toughest thing is going to be is getting the amount of material right. So this is going to be, make sure you know what the bottom is. It's going to swim like this. It's going to swim hook point up. So I've got it like this, and then I just kind of measure out my materials, and I want to make sure I have some room for that tail. So I'm going to put it about right here. So I'll get it kind of trimmed to where I want it to be. Then I'm going to attempt to just 2 loose wraps. I'll flip that. Make sure that my hair is stacked. And actually what I'm going to do is make sure that these are even. And I'm going to try and stack this, make sure. So it looks pretty good. Trim it. Put it right on there. Do maybe a pinch wrap. Get it right on there. 2 wraps. And then I'm going to try and get this separated evenly is the key. But if anything, I want this lighter color to be sucked right on top. I don't want this to go over on the sides too much. I would rather have my green go over on the side too much. That's just my personal thought. You can call me an idiot. You wouldn't be the first, so get that pushed around. Make sure that my hairs are where I want them to be. And this is my thinnest little stack that I'm going to do. I don't know if that makes it the easier one or the harder one. So I'm going to get a couple wraps off, so I'm going to be able to. Now, this is where I'm going to pull down. So I'm going to pinch right here really tight, and I'm going to pull. This is 280, just like I used in the last video. This is 280 white. I've only got white and black in 280, I think. So if I want a red collar, I'll just... And I didn't cord my thread quite enough. And I should put my clamp down. And I'm not going to put any flash here. I'm going to put flash maybe after my next one. And there was no flare in this hair, which is alright. So that's my first one. So again, you can kind of see as it builds, I'm hoping that it kind of comes together a little bit. But so I'm going to maybe give a couple more wraps there. And then I'm just going to bounce down right to here. And I'm going to come up just a little bit because I don't want this bump to interfere with my next stack of hairs. So I've got another bit of this. Again, I don't know what to call this. It's like just maybe a super light olive. So I'm going to get that measured out. And I just want it a little bit shorter than that one. Get that down. Maybe a little bit longer. 2 wraps. Before I do anything, I'm going to get my olive and my pistachio. Make sure my thread is corded. Measure these out a little bit longer. Trim them up. Make sure and cord this thread up. Get 1 wrap off of there. I don't want too many wraps. And this is where it gets really tricky because I don't want anything getting in the way. Meet those right in the middle. I just don't want too many wraps yet. So I think I've just got 2 on this one. So just to make sure that these are going to be where I want them, then I'm going to pinch really tight and give it a good pull. And then what I actually might do is loosen up a little and give this a pull. And I am right at that point of breaking. You kind of want it a little high and tight. And then what I'm actually going to do is right here. I'm not going to put too many more. I'm not going to put a ton of wraps. I'm going to trim with a razor blade. I'm going to trim off this excess because I don't want a ton of bulk, and this 280 bulks up super quick. So I'm going to trim this off, then I'm going to grab my goat and I'll stop there. Alright, so you can kind of see it's pretty prevalent right here. On the other side it's not as much, but you can see I have that little gap right here, and that's where I'm going to put just a thin strip of Arctic goat. And this is kind of like marabou. When it gets wet, you can see, I don't know if you can see it better, you can see it's really fluffy, but when it gets wet, it's just going to be one strip. And so I just want it, maybe I'll go probably as far down as my bucktail goes. I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to put it down. Maybe I'll trim this. I just want to make sure that it's going to go right where I want it to. Maybe I'll cord up my thread. And I have to be careful. I don't want, I have a nice bump going here, and I'm not really going to spread this out. I'm just going to let it sit right on the side. I don't want to spread this out because it's supposed to be just a strip of black right on the side, and I'm kind of just going right off the eyes. It might be a little bit low, but something like that, you eyeball it and you call it good. Because now again, I mean, I could spend 5 minutes making sure that these are going to be the same amount of material, the same exact length. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and call it right there. Put it right on the side. Just do a loose wrap right like that. And I'm going to actually put some super glue down just to make sure. So I don't know if you can see that strip. Again, I don't know how this is going to look. I've never tied this pattern before. I didn't practice this at all. It's just kind of something. I was looking at my box of jigs and trying to think of something I haven't really done yet. So that strip should go right down there. And I'm doing that before I put my last bit of hair down, because that's just what I wanted to do, I guess. So I just don't think I'm going to have enough room. I'm going to put some glue down, let it dry, and we'll do the head. Alright, so that glue's dry. I've got 2 more bits of hair that I'm going to put on, and it's going to be the shortest but the most dense. And so I'm really just going to kind of tie this one in at full length. I'm going to go right above my jig head, cord up my thread, and this is where it's going to be tricky with this kind of hair clip thing. And I'm going to just get 2 wraps, and I'm just going to hold that pressure. I'm going to hold that pressure while I spin it, and then hopefully I can let go and get this other stack ready. This one's going to be a little bit longer than that one. Maybe about right there. And then eventually I'm going to have to take this clip off, just because I wish I could remove the guards. But what I'm going to try to do is I'll angle this in my fingers, and I'm going to try and catch that stuff, and I can pull it down right there. And then I'm going to try and get this stuff separated, because I've only got some loose wraps. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Even though you want it to be, you can end up cleaning it up relatively decently. I just want full coverage all around. Alright, I think that's as good as it's going to get. So now I'm going to pinch this and pull, and there's a lot of flare in this hair, so I'm going to end up trimming it. And I want to fold back the hair that I want, and I'm going to give it some good wraps, and this is going to take some trimming because I have all of that hair by the neck, or collar, neck. So I might just fast forward this just to show you guys, but I'm going to get this trimmed, and I think I might do a red collar. Alright, that was a close one. When I first started trimming, I hit my thread, and that's why I always wrap enough times around at first, because when I first started kind of trimming these heads like this, I would just wrap like 2 or 3 times and then I would trim because I really wanted a super thin collar, but then whenever I would nick my thread it would get loose, and so you kind of have to, you can't have both. So again, I don't know how this is gonna look wet, but I kind of like it so far. I'm gonna get this bait wet. I put just a little super glue down because I couldn't whip finish with this, and I didn't want to try and whip finish with my hand and get it pushed up on this, so I just did a couple half hitches and put a little super glue down. I'm gonna let that dry a minute and then I'm gonna get this bait wet. Alright, so as it usually does, I don't know if you can tell, there's that little, after the hook, there's that little crease. You can kind of see, it's kind of weird, it's super wet, but there's a little bump, but you can kind of see that black shows right through. On this side it's not as much, but I think if I separate those hairs a little bit, bass pattern right here, a little red collar, but it looks really fat, but when it's in the water, that's what I really want. When it's in the water, it's not too thin. I just don't want it too thin. So whenever I tie a lot of these baits, that it might look really puffy when it's dry, but as soon as this bait gets wet and this 3/8 ounce jig can do its thing, it's really gonna collapse a lot. So, but I don't hate it. Tie a couple of these up, put them in the box, and we'll see how it goes. Juniors Fishing Company, juniorsfishing.com. See you on the next one.